Hey everyone, this is the WagmiTV crew back at it. Today we're going to be covering the Binance Smart Chain hack as well as the Chainlink and Swift partnership. But just before that, we'll be covering some of the XRP news over from a couple of the fellas here. So hope everyone's doing well. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe below if you like the content. But how's everyone doing?
We're doing good. I'm feeling kind of, I'm feeling bullish for the first time in a while. Just confident about, Bitcoin staying pretty steady. A lot of other cryptos still, doing stuff outside of, their chart action. They're actually adding to the fundamentals of their business and things like that, growing. We have seen some layoffs with some companies as well, but I feel like that's just part of this kind of bear market time. But I'm actually surprised at how things are turning out right now.
Yeah. I feel like I love to see the partnerships, during the bear market. You just proof that people are continuing to build. This is that accumulation time, that accumulation zone where not financial advice, but you DCA in, you kind of get your base, and then when the markets fly, you're in a good spot. So it feels like we're at a nice spot where Bitcoin's showing some resilience, and there's some good news in the space.
Yeah, it's interesting. Those are both great points. It's like this is the time when all the development does happen. This is the time when you do start stacking a lot of these areas, and that's what's gonna make you the big bucks in the end, right? The real money is made in the bear market. So not just the real money for investors, but true innovation is really going on at this time when things seem a little bit gloomy. So I think they correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Sia, but I think they usually call it Uptober in the crypto space. Q4 is usually pretty good. So although we haven't seen Uptober, what's been nice is it feels like everything else has been tanking, but Bitcoin specifically has been staying pretty strong. You got a chart for us?
Yeah, so this is the Bitcoin daily chart. We've been seeing, pretty stable price action. And obviously by what we mean by stable is, hanging out within a 30 to 40% range from the low to high over time. I mean, this is over what now, like a few months. And so it's really been interesting to see how it's been able to stay within, a 33, 35, maybe 40% range of price action, where in the past, obviously, within a 6-month period, you could see it go from 10K to 60K back down to 15K. But this is about as stable as Bitcoin has been in the last year and a half or so, maybe even 2 years. So it's just interesting to see that. And then obviously, in terms of what we're looking at next, like between 29.7-ish and where we're at right now, there aren't really too many key levels. Like I think if we're looking at like going back to the upside in terms of like bullish action, like we'd have to be up by 29 and breaking 29 to go. But I think what we're looking at from a downside area is if we break below 17.5, that's where it could get a little bit dicey. So, we're just kind of watching. As long as we range like this, I think people kind of tend to freak out if they see it go up or down 5%, 5 to 10% in a day. But like zooming out, we're ranging pretty well and staying relatively stable for what Bitcoin's done in the past.
And I guess a question for you, Sia, when was the last time we went below 19? Has that been in the last few weeks, or was it really that initial dip back in, what was that, maybe June that we last saw it?
Yeah, so June we went, so we've dropped below 19 previously. That was just about a month ago, a little bit less than a month ago. We dropped back below 19. It was for not very long. It was right here. But in terms of when we last dropped below 18, that wasn't since June. So like we haven't had that huge drawdown to below 18 since June. So watching like the 17.5 area, that's the lowest we got. So if we're able to stay above that and stay pretty stable until whatever the next bullish tailwind could be, I think that's kind of the goal right now. The goal isn't to just like boom, all of a sudden we see 30K or something like that. Like the goal is just to, at this point, stay within this channel of 30, 40% and just kind of hang tight and not lose the 17.5 18K support.
Right. And I think something that we saw a couple weeks ago was around in the macro perspective was the Bank of England talking about doing quantitative easing. And that was a big red flag where you could see inflation continuing to push higher and asset prices to move up. Whereas when you look at most of the other central banks around the world, they were talking about tightening, increasing rates, making it tougher to borrow. Bad signs for assets, and especially crypto, kind of a growth asset in itself. I think some news that we saw this past week was that the Bank of England had talked about how they wanted to do quantitative, or they would stop quantitative easing in December. So I think for the last couple of weeks, we're up in the air thinking about how other central banks would react to that. And it was, nice to hear that they set a schedule where, maybe we can revisit that idea, but for the most part, maybe that big scare of quantitative easing across the board globally probably wasn't going to happen. So,
yeah, great point. Just from a macro standpoint, everything that's going on, it doesn't feel like there's very much good news. And back, taking this back to Bitcoin, kind of full circle there, it just feels like Bitcoin's kind of the sleeping giant between that, whatever it is, 8 to 9% range that it's been spanning within. It almost feels like almost like a sleeping giant waiting for one direction to happen, right? It's like,
right.
What's going to be the catalyst? Is it going to be a bearish headwind down, or is it going to be some bullish headwind?
Because we've been in that zone for so long now.
Yeah. And it's pretty surprising how well it's been keeping up, especially with fiat's getting wrecked, other than the US dollar, of course. So yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that. And I think we do have we have a CPI print on Thursday of this week? What is it, the 13th? Is that what it is? Or am I off on that?
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think that's coming up, but we don't have another Fed meeting until like the first week of November.
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't have an interest rate hike till then. But obviously CPI can have an impact on price action too.
Yep.
Yeah, market will be future looking in that standpoint, and what they're going to be, the market's going to be looking for is inflation starting to come down, because that's what the Fed is trying to fight, right? So they're going to try to predict what the Fed's going to do in that next meeting once they have that inflation print. What were you going to say, Ev?
I was just going to say you're right. So Thursday, October 13th is the next CPI print. Expectations are at 8.1. So last month we saw 8.3%. Core CPI, which was, I think, the big indicator last month, where it went from, I think expectations were 6.1, and it went up to 6.3. We're actually expecting a core inflation expectation, or core CPI expectation, of 6.5%. So actually more than what we saw last month. I think that'll be the big number. I think that'll be the one that kind of determines what type of hike, we're going to have next month.
Much like it did on the last one. Yeah.
Right.
So be watching both of them. That's for sure.
No, that's a great call out, though. Definitely something to keep your eye on.
Awesome. But yeah, all in all, things are going pretty all right, it seems. But let's. What do you think about hopping into some of this news? We can do the Binance Smart Chain hack here first.
Let's hit it.
Let's do it.
Perfect. Let me share my screen really quickly just to kind of keep us on track here. So we'll go into the Binance Smart Chain hack. As I mentioned, right. Let's dive in. We have basically the headline here, right, is that $570 million worth of Binance's BNB token was stolen in a major crypto hack, is how CNBC put it. So ultimately, this ended up draining about $100 million of BNB, that Binance native coin. And so the thought is that this could have been much worse, and we'll get into kind of the background of the attack, the response that happened, and we can even compare it to some of the other hacks that we've seen as of late. But there's a pretty quick response. The community, acted really, really well on this one. And just for a little bit of background, so for those who don't know, and we'll refer to it as the BSC from here on out, but the Binance Smart Chain is a blockchain that's closely connected with the crypto exchange Binance, if you're familiar with that. And so BNB itself consists of two blockchains, the Beacon chain, which processes essentially simple transactions, and then the Smart Chain, which processes the smart contract transactions. And so what happened here was actually a hack of the bridge between the chains, which we'll get into here in a second. And so let's dive into the attack itself. So the initial funds for the BNB Smart Chain attack came through the instant crypto exchange service called Change Now. So this is where the hacker essentially performed what they call a double spending attack. They stole, and I'll get into that in a second, they stole about 2 million of BNB, which is the Binance native token, from the BSC token hub bridge. And that was right in an attempt to launder really over half a billion dollars, right? And so in essence, the way I kind of put quotations around steal, a good way to kind of describe this is if someone snuck into the, US Federal Reserve and started printing money and then walking away with it, right? So they didn't necessarily steal it from any specific individual or anyone that had owned that, but essentially what they did was printed more of that BNB and took it with them. So what they did is then they used this.
Mata,
sorry,
go
ahead.
Just for common terms here, replay attacks are super common in most technology. It's not only a blockchain attack. It's something that can happen in almost any web app. If you were to look at your Chase account, right? If you were to log in, use those credentials and tokens that you got to take out money, and then 2 days later use those same session tokens to do it again, and Chase allowed it, that's essentially what that replay attack is. So it's using the exact same authentication. So like you're saying, right? Like it's nobody's money that you're stealing. It's just, Chase is almost paying you too much in that sense, double the amount. Sorry, keep going.
No, that's really good context. I actually really appreciate that. It kind of brings it more into the real world as well, and not just kind of the crypto space. So super, super helpful. I think, to move on from that piece, right? They essentially they print this BNB, they walk away with it. And then what they're doing is actually utilizing what they did was they used this BNB as collateral in DeFi protocols, right? Things like Uniswap, SushiSwap, Curve Finance that we've talked about in the shows before, really to borrow $150 million worth of different stable coins, right? What they then did from there is they sent to various cross-chain bridges and then converted those into other cryptos, which they were then allowed to take with them, right? So I think the interesting part about this is it's not the first time we've seen a bridge hack. It's not the first time that, crypto in general in the space has been plagued with hackers, right? And so I think what was really important was kind of the way that BNB and the community and the validators responded, right? So on Thursday, I believe a lot of this news came out on Friday. So on Thursday of last week, BNB validators actually noticed some strange activity taking place on that BSC token hub, which again is one of the platform's bridges, and where it was being utilized to mint those additional BNB tokens. So that's when BNB and validators actually elected to pause the BNB chain altogether to prevent damage to the ecosystem and really start to assess what do we do next, right? And so the BNB chain has about 25, upper 20s active validators. And so this was obviously an emergency shutdown. It's not necessarily anything new, but it has happened to a few chains lately, which we'll talk about as well. But essentially from there, right, they restarted the chain with the help from the validators. And what they started to do was introduce new governance structures, really to decide whether hacked funds should be frozen. And then there even is a little bit of detail, and I can get into this in a second, around what they might be doing just in general from the governance perspective. So what I thought was interesting is what was stated from the BNB team is that the BNB token is growing at a sustainable rate because these hackers didn't steal someone's money specifically, like we were just talking about. The BNB community is planning to include $2 million worth of BNB tokens in its upcoming burn this year as a way to bring it back down to parity. And essentially, I think we talk about this all the time with inflation, right? The more you print, it's essentially a supply and demand piece. The more you print, the more you're debasing that currency. And essentially, by burning that $2 million worth of BNB tokens, they're hoping to bring that back down and basically get rid of the effect that some of this had on the system itself.
And quick question, Mata, for BNB, is it something where they're at, their total amount of coins dispersed or unlocked, or where are they at, I guess, in their unlock schedule for that chain?
Let me look that up.
That's a great
right
question.
now.
Because I think you could kind of see a difference between, if all the tokens are out there, right? That really is somebody's money that has to be burned. Whereas,
totally.
If not, it could be something that's further down in the roadmap per se.
Can you see this? So this is coin market cap for BNB. The max supply, it looks like, is 200 million. They're at just under that at 161, 162. So they're not quite at that max supply quite yet, but that circulating supply is about 81%, looks like.
And so I guess the question is, is that $2 million coming from, BNB token that hasn't been circulating, or where does that come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would assume it's from that is circulating. But The question is then where does that come from, right? And so that's something that we'll need to keep an eye on, because I don't think that's been released. It wasn't something that I saw posted anywhere. So that's a really good question, though.
Yeah.
Right on the money.
I think the biggest questions to kind of run through is these were some that I came up with. I don't know if you all had any specific questions on this, but who's doing these hacks? It's, again, not one of the first bridge hacks that we've seen. Is it some specific group? Is it some specific individual? Is it a certain country? Those sorts of things. I don't know if you all had any sort of take on that. What I thought was interesting was kind of the stablecoin issuers and the power that they actually might have, right? So Tether actually said that they blacklisted the ETH wallet that received the USDT via that bridge chain that we talked about, right? And so it's interesting to kind of think through that, because it's okay, that's great for this sort of situation, right? But is it not a little bit concerning that we're able to kind of censor and have these centralized electors of what's good and what's bad? I think that's kind of what the crypto and blockchain community is really trying to get away from. And so I guess I wanted we don't necessarily have to talk about who hacked it, because I don't know if anyone truly knows unless you have specific ideas. But any thoughts kind of on the issuer power from the stablecoin side of things?
Yeah, I feel like it's, and obviously Soam's not here today, but he always makes good points about this. But right now, crypto is in this interesting kind of balance of some of the the highly touted and most speculative projects like Solana and stuff get criticized for being centralized. There's a lot of other different currencies that get heat for being too centralized. But I feel like right now crypto is not at that point where everything can be decentralized, because if this had happened and everything was decentralized, the pace of it being fixed would be different. How it was addressed would be different. There'd be a lot more unknowns. And so it's almost like this kind of, balance that you're trying to keep, where I don't know if crypto's at that point where we can afford to be fully decentralized, but we're kind of slowly moving towards that way. But I think obviously it's the goal that we all kind of envision, but at the same time, maybe, we do need centralization still for things like this, but I think it's something to think about.
No, that's a really great point. Maybe it's just the maturity piece, and you need to go through these kind of trials and tribulations in order to get to the point that we're hoping to. We would, I guess, just hope that, the centralized electors don't just end up taking everything over, right? I guess that's kind of the hope in that sort of scenario, where it's we need them for now, but we're trying to get rid of them. Hopefully they'll be the type of people that will relinquish power to,
right.
Be more
I
centralized.
feel like there's so much to explore in this space of how do we respond to these type of attacks. Because I have a tweet from Woo Blockchain where they run through in the last year, 11 large cross-chain bridge attacks that have accumulated close to $2 billion worth. And I'll go ahead and pop that up on the screen. But it's ridiculous just, how often this happens. And and how commonplace this has become. And I think it's where the major vulnerabilities are in locked up assets on chain or in these bridges. And so my question is are we attacking this in different ways, like with the BNB bridge hack here? Is this something where because I feel like we've heard this strategy used in other places where essentially they shut down the network. They try and talk through other governance options where they say, hey, let's allow more power into kind of the centralized party within, the ecosystem or network here on BNB. And we say, hey, we're going to give them the keys to the network. When they want to shut it down, they can shut it down. When they don't, let it go. So I don't know. It feels like there hasn't been enough time for opportunities or solutions in this space to be explored. But you can see this is like one of the biggest problems that we have. So yeah, we'll see how this kind of plays out. But it feels like the response that we get from these bridge hacks haven't evolved enough to really find a good solution, and it's just going to continue to keep happening.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Kind of like the crypto exchange hacks of before. That's kind of like the new age version of that, is these bridge hacks, right? So you'd hope in a similar format that they'll start to learn and adapt and make these updates so that they're not as vulnerable here moving forward, right? It just seems to be that's the newest wave of like, okay, we need to interoperate between these different crypto platforms, between these different currencies that we have, and the bridges are essentially kind of the way to do that, right? So that's what's hot right now from the hacker's perspective. And hopefully with all these hacks, right, you kind of can learn from your mistakes and learn from the bad things that happen, because obviously no one likes to hear these things, but maybe some of those bad things need to happen in order for us to get everything straight.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you make a great point about the communities itself. And that was something that, I was kind of praising BNB for. And I don't know if it's just because it's a little bit smaller, right? You only have the 25 to 30-ish validators, right? But what we're really seeing as these bridge hacks start to continue is that these communities are rallying around these blockchains, and they're getting much better at shutting them down quickly and updating their systems to prevent some of the worst cases, right? I think that kind of full circle brings us back to what's the cost of that, right? Because the ones that are able to act the quickest are, just generally more centralized, right? So power is kind of centralized in a certain area. They're able to make decisions a lot quicker. So, you never really know. I think Garcia brought up a really good point. Like, there's a fine balance between the two of them. But yeah. It's about all I had on that. That was some pretty big news this week. You never like to hear about a hack. And bridge hacks is not something super new for this year, as Evan just shared with us. But yeah, I think we're going into the XRP news next. See, you got some stuff for us?
Yeah. So the XRP saga has been going on for quite a long time now. It's been 2 years actually since the first kind of SEC filing came to everyone's attention. But just to take a step back for 1 second, basically why this whole XRP lawsuit came about was the SEC was saying it's a security, and XRP never, before they listed XRP, they never said, hey, this is a security, so they couldn't list it, and therefore the investment that was made in it should be null and void and should be shut down. XRP is saying it's more of a currency. And the reason why they're saying that is because really what Ripple does, XRP, what they do is provide a infrastructure for financial institutions, governments, businesses to basically set up, different types of economies with what they're doing with crypto. So whether it's cross-border payments, or they need instant settlement with crypto liquidity, or they've actually done this with smaller countries already, like they've fully implemented it with smaller countries, is they have infrastructure to set up CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies. So they're basically looking to be the main provider of basically B2B crypto infrastructure going into the future. And so a lot of what they're doing is really on the currency side, and that's kind of where the main argument is coming from. But two updates that happened recently was on September 29th, basically XRP had filed to have a particular transcript that is supposed to basically show how the SEC really did see it as a currency in the beginning. They're going to release that transcript now. The judge actually on September 29th said we're going to release the transcript. So it's of this SEC official, William Hinman, and his documents that he was going back and forth with these folks early on in the case. So that was a big win for them. The second big win was that they're actually going to, so the judge and the court basically said they're going to start allowing outside entries into the case. So what that means is that they can actually have people and companies come in and advocate for Ripple who have either used it or experienced it and kind of speak to how it isn't a security. So they're going to have these companies come in and basically start talking about and advocating for Ripple. So that's kind of some of the big reason why we saw, and those annoying spin wheels are really distracting. But like basically
targeted
that's
ads, man. What are you looking at?
Yeah. What are we looking at? I'm trying to gamble with this market. I just need to go to a casino. That's my best ROI. So that's kind of what's been going on and why Ripple has been pumping, because first of all, they didn't think that they were going to get this approved. They thought that the judge was going to rule that it was basically like conflict of interest, having some of these clients and potential clients come in and advocate for the Ripple team and the fact that it's a currency. But they not only approved that, they also approved getting that transcript that the SEC was trying to hide from them. So that's, some major big wins on the lawsuit front. In terms of what's coming next, it's really just going to be, honestly, the best way to categorize it, like just some boring, like lawyer stuff. Like basically right now, it's going to be like releasing of files, starting to kind of do more of a data dump. But they're basically having both parties kind of file new materials and show these kind of transcripts that they've unlocked. And, basically every week for the next, 2 months leading up to the end of 2022, there's going to be, some of these kind of court actions going on and files coming through. And so what the CEO of XRP was saying is that he is kind of predicting, him and his team are basically running the business as if this will be done midway through 2023. So that's kind of like what investors have been taking into account and why we've been seeing it kind of have some pretty crazy price action. I think it was up like 50-60% in a week, just about a week ago. And it had been pretty stagnant up until that point, but we had those two positive outcomes on the lawsuit. And then not only that, one last thing I wanted to share before we get into more of a discussion is that Ripple actually signed 2 agreements recently. So one with a company called Lemonway, which is a marketplace, and they use basically a payment processing system that's based in France. They also did the same thing in Sweden. So they're basically taking their on-demand liquidity product, the one that we looked at before, that crypto liquidity product, and offering that and signing contracts with these companies. So like they have like dozens of customers already. Like it's already like something that's in action, something that has use cases. And again, they're like expecting to hire 300 people throughout this whole 2022 year. They're on track to do that. So by December of this year, they're going to be hiring 300 total. So like they're still moving fundamentally. Like they have customers that are getting benefit out of it. They're going to come testify in the court case. And so things are moving and things are looking pretty positive for them. It seems like, the last 2 weeks were kind of a turning point where I think a lot of people thought XRP was just going to flat out lose the case.
That's pretty awesome to hear. And I think there's probably like a lot to unpack there, but it's something just off of what you just said about payment systems in France and other areas in Europe. This is something we'll talk about in this episode here, but Swift is really what's used for that cross-border payment system, right? It's something that already exists. It's something that feels like it's been used. I mean, it has been used against Russia in this most recent Ukraine war, against Iran with some of their nuclear deals that we've had, or not agreeing with or not going by the standards. So this is like very real, utility here, and something why I think what we're going to see is talk about is why Swift wants to move on to Chainlink to start to bring their data on chain, because you see XRP already being able to do this, already being able to bring this to other customers in France, and I think Switzerland was the other one you said, or
Sweden.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess, see, a question for you. What does a win look like for this XRP case? Is it just to be listed on certain exchanges again, or what else could they gain coming out of this?
So it's that so they want the SEC to recognize XRP not as a security, but as a currency. And so that would be the big win, because they essentially, the play for XRP is not at all B2C. Like, it's not at all like, oh, we need faster transactions per second. We need to be able to integrate with DeFi apps. We need to be able to be user friendly. That's important to a certain extent, but what they're trying to capture is essentially, there's been a lot of studies about the movement to CBDCs. And so like, there's this white paper that they have on their website where they talk about how most CFOs and most heads of finance for countries and governments see CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies, as like the way that the world is going to be moving forward. So Ripple basically is thinking, hey, if we're the first one that can implement it easily for countries and provide the infrastructure, like, we're going to explode. So essentially the first company to make it easy for a country to transition over to a central bank digital currency and actually issue their own digital currency. That's kind of the biggest market they're playing off of. Like, they also want to be a cross-border payment facilitator as well, but that comes with the CBDC. So they're all about making it easier for like institutions and then also like these larger governments to get on board with crypto and actually customize it the way that they want.
Right.
And I feel like CBDCs could be an entire episode that we actually go into, like the pros and cons of it, what the difference is, right? And some of the companies that are helping with it. I know XLM or Stellar Lumens is another one that's been up there. I think, Evan, to your point, like a win for XRP is obviously a win for XRP, but really at stake in this Ripple case specifically is really a standard that could start to be applied to other token projects, right? So if XRP wins, there could be standing for continuing token sales to fund decentralized project development. Like, it's ultimately going to fall really upon the legal system to determine what XRP buyers thought they were buying in the first place. And it's interesting because all of this happened before Gary Gensler, who's been the one who's been pushing a lot of this regulation, actually stepped in to start to do that. So I think a win for XRP is great as a win for XRP, but it's also going to kind of set that standard here moving forward, which makes this case really, really important just for this space in general.
Yeah, and I think, one of the biggest things that I did, and I've just learned more as I've covered it more, but like, it really falls, like, the SEC case has taken up so much of the spotlight around Ripple that people forget that it actually is like an operating company. It has customers, like, it has case studies, it has use cases, they have NGO partners across 80 countries across the world. So like, it's a real company. It's just, it's been under this microscope of SEC lawsuit, like all this kind of stuff. So it's made investors not want to invest. It's been taken off exchanges. And so people are getting really speculative going into next year of like, okay, well, what if we basically like release the Kraken, where now it's on exchanges, it has real world utility, which most cryptos don't. I think we wish more crypto had real world utility out the gate, but a lot of them don't. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how they bounce back next year if they get a good ruling.
Yeah, I would think another episode is in store for Ripple and CBDCs. I mean, there's so much that we can unpack there. So
yeah, that's a good one. We'll take note of that.
Yeah,
on that,
scary.
Yeah. On that note, would love to hear a little bit about this Chainlink and Swift partnership.
Yeah, I mean, I think this XRP segment flows really well into it. So I think announced in the last couple of weeks, there's been a partnership between Chainlink and Swift, which if you don't know, Swift is essentially a network where messages are sent between nations or actually banks within different nations to send money across borders. So just like we talked about, it's making that flow of money overseas quick, accurate, secure. And it's something that we've seen kind of become weaponized. When you look at Russia being taken off of Swift, Iran being taken off of Swift, it's a really important network that can be used to easily send money between nations and, in that sense, provide liquidity for different currencies. You could see a currency, lose a lot of value in a short period of time if it was taken off of the Swift network because people weren't able to buy and sell it. It's no longer as useful as it used to be. So in 2019, there was more than 11,000 Swift member institutions. So that's banks, that's different financial institutions that can send money back and forth, and approximately 33 million transactions per day through that network. So significant usage across the globe. And I think this is something that has been in the making for a long period of time. I watched a couple interesting YouTube videos on, one of the global heads of partnership at Swift talking about how they had seen Chainlink as a super interesting project, 2015, 2016, maybe a little later than that, and wanted to partner with them. And like we talked about, like they want to be able to bring their off-chain data on-chain. And so what does this mean? Well, nothing is built out at the moment. It's not like we can go into the Swift Chainlink Oracle and determine what data is being stored on-chain. But the idea of it is that it's going to make it more transparent, more easy. It's creating more of those on and off ramps for crypto and traditional finance to be able to work with, company or countries' currencies and different cryptocurrencies. So this is just another example of why, one, Chainlink is such an awesome project and why oracles are important to bring, data into the blockchain world, but really, how we can combine traditional finance and some of the pretty solid guardrails we have around that into Chainlink. So, there's not a lot built out in this sense. It's really kind of an announcement that, hey, Swift is entering the space. I could see it being, a response or a premeditated action, knowing that Ripple has a lot of opportunity in this space to work between or facilitate transactions across borders. But no, pretty exciting to hear and definitely a big name to be added to the already impressive list of oracles on the Chainlink network. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just trying to envision how it's going to work together, right? Because you as we talked about before, and as you reiterated, it seems like Chainlink's goal is to bring, and hopefully I say this right, but off-chain data on-chain,
right?
And so I'm kind of curious as to what the partnership's going to look like. If they're going to be able to make it, the Swift process, those 33 million transactions you mentioned, are they going to be able to make it faster, easier, maybe easier to organize and create into a ledger? I'm kind of curious if it's on that side or if it's, if they're adding value in a different way. So I'm kind of curious to see.
Yeah. I think it's kind of difficult to tell. I mean, what they want to do is, really make it easier. Like I think I mentioned, Swift isn't the one that's actually sending the transactions. You can think of it almost as like a Slack messaging service for your company. It's really where a lot of the payment information is sent, but not the actual, currency is. I've got questions too. I wondered, why do you want to put that on a public ledger and how does that really help, anybody in that payment transaction. So we'll have to see. Maybe it's something where they're looking to go into a new space, and that isn't their traditional, utility that they provide. But Mata, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see where they take this. I'm kind of a little bit, I don't know if confused is the right word, but I'm just not quite sure the direction that they're headed, right? Chainlink is building really cutting edge technology that obviously is attracting attention of pretty significant institutions, right? So in my mind, at the very least, an organization like Swift would start to partner with a crypto project. The reason would be because they're trying to, keep up with the times, if you will. So my question is, what does that look like from here, right? I don't know if it's exactly how we're kind of projecting it or if they have other plans. So it'll be interesting to see how this one unfolds. And I wonder if it's just kind of a way in order to get ahead in, the blockchain space before it kind of starts to become a little bit more of the standard as time goes on. So I don't know if they're thinking they might become irrelevant at some point or something like that. So they're trying to kind of get ahead of it. I don't really know. I'm not super familiar with Swift, so definitely don't want to talk any crap about them or anything, but just seems like an interesting partnership that I don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, and I think it could be one of those things where they're getting ahead of the curve. Maybe this is technology that's not ready for their utility at the moment, but could be in the future. And so you're right. Maybe they're trying to get ahead of the curve and prepared for use cases that as us retail investors maybe don't see. But who knows, when more institutions come into the space, this could be an extremely useful piece of data that wasn't originally in the ecosystem. Like we said, Chainlink provides a lot of that off-chain data to blockchains. And so, we'll see how this utility can be kind of useful in the future.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Awesome.
Anything else, fellas?
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's the big news for the week. So hope everybody enjoyed. Again, if you like the content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe below, or we'll respond to anything. And we always like to hear what you think of the episode, what you think of the topics, maybe some insights that you all have and what you'd like us to cover next. But you all have a great week, and we will chat with y'all soon.